This short tutorial looks at markup and margin math. It's something that we look at in the Introduction to Marketing class that I teach at university. I hope you find it helpful. What's great about markup and margin math is that it's really simple. It can get really complex, but if you remember that the selling price is a combination of the cost of the product and the markup or margin, it really is all you need to know. This little equation will keep you on track and keep you grounded. And if you're really good with algebra, it is really all you need to know when it comes to calculating these two things. If you're not so good with algebra, don't worry. I've got a little trick up my sleeve to help you out. Let's start with an example. So let's take a really simple company. We sell toasters. We sell them for $30. The cost is $20. We're trying to figure out what our markup is in dollars, what our margin is as a percentage of the selling price, and what our markup is as a percentage of the cost. Whenever you get a question like this, best thing to do is take inventory. What are the pieces of information that you already know? So in our inventory of facts, we see that the selling price is $30 and the cost is $20. It's also important to identify what it is that the question is asking you for. In this case, we're looking for the margin or markup in dollars. We're also looking to calculate the margin as a function of the selling price and give a percentage, and also the same for cost, with markup as cost, again, as a percentage. I'm a visual person, and so this little tool called the MC chocolate bar, which was introduced to me by a colleague many years ago, has been incredibly helpful at keeping me straight and keeping students straight when it comes to markup and margin math. This is just a graphic representation of the equation that selling price is a combination of the markup or margin plus the cost. So these two things together, the big square that's an M and the big square that's a C, come together to make a selling price chocolate bar. Those are the two parts. We know from our question that we sell our product for $30. So in this case, the selling price is $30. We also know from the question that the cost of the product is $20. We know that we're trying to find the markup. We can rearrange the selling price equation and isolate for the markup that we're trying to find. So if we simply subtract the cost from the selling price, we end up with our $10 markup or margin in dollars. We also need to find some percentages. We need to first find the margin. So let's throw our dollars back in there. These are the things that we've calculated so far or knew from the question. The equation for margin is, and I've identified it here as an MS, simply because margin is a function of the selling price. So in order to calculate the margin, we have the dollars, and the markup in dollars, divided by the selling price, also in dollars. In this case, we've got our $10 markup or margin in dollars divided by $30. This is 33%. What this says is that the selling price is made up of two things. 33% of the selling price is margin and the remainder is cost. Now, since we're talking about this as a function of the selling price is the 100%. So the margin is expressed as a function of the selling price. So since that's in the denominator, the selling price is 100%. The relationship of selling price, markup, and cost hold true whether you're talking about dollars or whether you're talking about percentages. So we can figure out what the percentage is for the cost as well, simply by subtracting the 33.3 from the 100. We can find out that the cost represents 66.7% of the selling price. This can be really helpful. The other thing we're looking for in this question is to find out what our markup is as a function of cost. So the equation changes just a little bit. The C denotes that we're looking for a markup, and there's a cost in the denominator this time as opposed to the selling price that we had for margin. Again, we can insert our numbers, and this time the percentage comes out to 50%. So the markup is 50% of the cost. Since cost is in the denominator, when you're talking about markup, the cost is the 100%. To find out what the percentage is for the selling price, we go back to that combination that selling price is the markup plus the cost added together. And again, that holds true whether it's percentages or dollars. So we can add those two together and say that the selling price is 150% of the cost. So those are all pretty straightforward. So let's practice. With those fundamental equations in place, let's look to an example where our product costs us $35 and our company expects to earn a 75% markup. The question is, how much do we sell for? Okay, let's fill in what we know and figure out what it is we're trying to find. First of all, the selling price is what we're trying to find. How much do we sell for? Filling in what we know that the cost is $35. We don't know the markup in dollars, and we don't know the selling price in dollars. From a percentage perspective, we know that we are looking for a 75% markup. We had that equation that we used just a few minutes ago, that the markup as a percentage is the markup in dollars divided by the cost in dollars. So let's fill in what we know. We can now rearrange the equation to solve for the markup in dollars. Comes out to 26.25. We can then use our fundamental equation that the selling price is the markup plus the cost, add those two together, and we come out to our selling price of $61.25. But that method requires you to remember which equation it is that you need to use. What if you can't remember the equation? I never could. So this is a way for you to work it out without that equation, or without having to memorize that equation. We know that 75% markup is a function of cost. The cost, therefore, is the 100%. We can remember that because when it's a markup, you deal with the cost. I know, silly, but it works. So when we're dealing with markup, 100% goes to the cost. We know that selling price is a combination of markup plus cost, and we know that that relationship holds true whether it's in dollars or a percentage. So in this case, we can add the two together, and the selling price is 175% of the cost. Because we've got a dollar value for cost and a percentage for cost, and we've got a percentage for the selling price, and we only need to find the dollar value for the selling price, we can set up a ratio. We can say that $35 is to 100% as the selling price is to 175%. We can then cross multiply and divide, and we end up with this. The selling price is equal to the $35 times 175% divided by 100. So we end up with a selling price of $61.25. It's a lot simpler, from my perspective anyways. Let's try again. What if the company changes the policy and instead expects a 40% margin? What's the selling price now? Again, pause the video and try on your own. When you're ready, come on back and we'll show you the solution. So what did you get? Did you get $45 or did you get $58.33? Congratulations! If you got the $58.33, you figured out the catch. If you got the $45, don't sweat it. I'll show you where you went wrong. Okay, so let's sort out what we need to find and what we know. We're trying to find the selling price. Like before, the cost is $35. We don't know the margin. We don't know the selling price. We've also got a percentage. This time it's 40%. 40% margin, which means it's given to us as a function of the selling price. If you got $45 as your answer, I'm pretty sure that you considered your 40% as a markup and looked at it as a function of cost. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Since we're given a margin, the formula that we need to use is the one for the margin, which is the margin in dollars divided by the selling price in dollars. The trouble is that we don't have two of the three pieces that we need in order to solve this equation. All we know is the 40%. So we can do a little bit of rearranging, multiplying some things out here, rearranging a little bit to isolate for that margin. We can then replace the selling price, which we don't know, with the markup and the cost, because we know the equation that the selling price is equal to the markup plus the cost. So we can replace that selling price with the markup plus cost figure that's there now. We can then get rid of that 40% over to the other side, isolate the margin numbers on one side, take out that margin, calculate the 1 over 40% minus 1, comes out to 1.5, divide both sides by 1.5, throw in our cost number, and we end up with a margin of 23.33. We can then add those two things together, knowing that selling price is a combination of margin plus cost, and we end up with the 58.33. Trouble is that that's a lot of math. It's also a lot of algebra, and you had to get the right equation in the first place. I'm not that reliable. So let's look at it another way. This is where the brilliance of the chocolate bar comes to play. So we still have the information that we know from the question. We know the cost is $35 and we know that the margin is 40%. But we're given that margin, and we know the relationship with margin is that it's a function of the selling price. So in this question, because we're dealing with margin, the selling price is the 100%. Since we know that markup and cost, or margin and cost, always add together to be the selling price, we can subtract the 40 from the 100 and know that the cost itself is the 60%. Those two always add together to be the selling price. We can then set up our ratio. This time the $35 is to 60% as the selling price is to 100. You can cross multiply and divide to get your equation to calculate the selling price. So you end up with the 35 times 100 divided by 60, and you come out to the 58.33. If you got the $45 as your answer, chances are that you made the cost the 100%, and you ended up multiplying it by 1.4. It's really important to recognize whether you're dealing with margin or markup. If you're dealing with margin, the selling price is the 100%. If you're dealing with markup, the cost is the 100%. And that's really all you need to know. This little equation builds you your chocolate bar. If you're not into algebra, that's okay. You can figure it out graphically, set up your ratios, cross multiply and divide, and it'll never steer you wrong. I hope you found this helpful. If you want to look for other tips or find out more about marketing at Kwantlen, you can check out my blog, the Kwantlen Marketing Department blog, or you can follow me on Twitter. Cheers!